I get asked all the time about which branch of the military you should join, and I've always tried to tell people that they need to choose the branch that best fits their personality. And today, we're going to dig into what I mean by that, share some experiences, and probably a little bit of talk amongst branches with the goal of getting you to a place where you can accurately assess pros and cons and make the right decision for you and your personality and goals. So let's dig in. The most important and often overlooked part of this whole decision process is you. You need to be honest with yourself about what you want out of your experience in the military. If you're looking for career skills and college, then that might be a different answer than if you're looking for combat experience and adventure. Likewise, education, travel, brotherhood, camaraderie, like all the things play into this. And I would wager that most people join for a mix of all of the above and then some, but everybody has a preference. Now we're going to lead right out the gate with the Marine Corps because that is the one that I know and love, and so we're going to dig in. Now I'm going to try to compare all of these to vehicles in hopes that maybe that helps some of you fellow car nuts make the decision. So I would call the Marine Corps a Jeep Wrangler. And no, I don't just mean we throw rubber duckies at each other and give each other the wave, though that might be a thing. However, what I mean is it's like an all-terrain, all-purpose adventure vehicle. It is rugged. If you've ever been in an old school Jeep Wrangler on the highway, it is not a comfortable experience. It doesn't get great gas mileage. And there are a lot of negatives about a Jeep Wrangler, and yet they have a cult following of enthusiasts who want the rugged, they want the adventure, they want everything that vehicle brings. That's similar to the Marine Corps. The Marine Corps is going to be best for people who want that challenge, that brotherhood, that pride, to be tough and hardened and disciplined and all those things that come with what you think of as joining the Marine Corps. And you should watch out for the fact that it is going to be the hardest and most challenging branch. It is not going to be the most comfortable lifestyle, and arguably there's maybe a little bit less overlap to civilian jobs as some of the occupations in, say, the Air Force, where they're more career focused than they are adventure focused per se. The Marine Corps is very first in, last out. We fight our nation battles. Marine Corps can be called up by the president and told to be anywhere in the world within 24 hours. We are a direct response force. We neutralize threats. We are the first people in. We see the action. We've got a long history of kicking butts, and there's a reason that we've earned that title of, or the slogan of no better friend, no worst enemy than a United States Marine. The Marine Corps is combat heavy, it's infantry focused, and while some of that is changing and evolving, essentially the entire Marine Corps as a unit is built to support combat roles and operations, direct combat roles and operations, i.e. infantry, artillery, motor transportation runs around, driving these people around with guns mounted on their trucks. We have a large Air Force side to the Marine Corps, but it is largely more attack and get people to attack vehicles than it is large-scale logistics. We have the longest and most intense boot camp standing at 13 weeks, and we also have arguably the hardest lifestyle, the most rugged, but also the highest amount of pride of service and probably, I would say, arguably the most esteem. Right now, I'm a little biased there, but I've not run into a lot of people in life who think Marine Corps and think of less than pride and esprit de corps, or esprit de corps, which is, the spirit of the corps, right? And also Marines have the best uniforms. Just saying. Okay, now when I think of the Navy, I think of an Astro van with guns, or a cargo vehicle with guns, or, a yacht with guns, right? We always joke in the Marine Corps that there are taxi service. Everybody always likes to poke fun that you're a branch of the Navy, and we're or you're a department of the Navy. We're we're the men's department, and all this other banter. But I love the Navy. It's ideal for world travelers, tech and engineering services, sea service, being on ship, exploring, if you want to be on a submarine, the nuclear side of things. Nuke program's huge in the Navy. They've got a large aviation side. The Navy is definitely focused on, they're internationally based all around the world. They're always out on the water, and they have a lot of tech and engineering opportunities, and they are largely a logistics and support element for the largest Navy in the world. Fun fact, the Navy also has the second largest Air Force. And for the Navy, their boot camp is 8 weeks, which is arguably a little bit nicer than, say, the Marine Corps. And it's at Great Lakes, Chicago area. So it gets a little cold in the winter, so maybe go during the summer. Now, again, the Navy is very diverse. They have Navy SEALs, although outside of that, there's not a whole lot of direct combat roles other than, say, ships, which arguably very direct combat when need to be, but don't get utilized all the time because most people don't with the U.S. Navy and submarines and aircraft, right? But as far as boots on the ground, outside of the SEALs and SWCC, which is essentially special warfare craft that help support SEALs, there's not a ton of direct combat focus in the Navy so much as supporting elements for the Navy and moving gear all around the world, and then aircraft carriers and submarines and all of that good stuff. I'd say the quality of life in the Navy is a little bit better than the Marine Corps, though it arguably kind of depends on if you're on ship or off ship and whether you're enlisted or officer. Because I'll tell you, being an enlisted schmuck on a naval ship is not the ideal quality of life. But then, when you're shoreside or an officer, not always that rough. So I would say the Navy is ideal for those who really want to get out and see the world and travel. Okay, on the Army side, we're going with a Dodge Charger. Somebody had to be the one that fit the stigma for what service members buy, which is Mustangs and Chargers and Challengers. And I chose the Army because it honestly doesn't not fit, right? This is ideal for structure, options, and some of that security of like job choice. They do use the word guarantee a little looser than I like, but generally if they guarantee you a job, as long as you qualify for it, you are going to get it. So there is that stability in knowing what you're getting into. They have fields in combat, logistics, medical, cyber, you name it. They've kind of got a little bit of everything across all spectrums. They've got Air Force, they've got aviation, they have basically everything but like a naval force. And then, I would say a little bit less specialized in a lot of that stuff, but like they are as by and large, like a general force, very well rounded to, I kind of joke like the Marines go in first and then the Army occupies, but that's kind of the mission. Now, there have been times for sure where the Army goes in first in history, but generally speaking, Marine Corps goes in, kicks down doors, and then the Army like runs the show. That's kind of how things have worked as of late. And by runs the show, I mean they take over, they occupy, they hold the fort down. There is a lot of bureaucracy in the Army, and there's a mixed quality of life, so just watch out for that stuff. Now, the Army is the largest force, and as such, they have arguably the most MOSs. I think it's like 190 jobs offered in the Army. Now, while they may not all be hyper-specialized, it does give you a lot of variety there. The Army's got good promotion paths, they've got good career opportunity and progression. It's kind of the best, like, middle-of-the-road choice, and, I've always joked with people that, like, when we really start jabbing at different branches of the military, I've always joked like there aren't any Army jokes because they're not good enough or bad enough at anything to be the blunt end of jokes. And that was my joke, is like, you guys are lukewarm, like blah. But the Army's great, right? Now, their boot camp is 10 weeks, and I honestly couldn't tell you too much about it other than when I was a young Marine at Fort Leonard Wood, and I had to live in Army recruit barracks for like 6 weeks while I was awaiting to train, and we had to interact with some of their drill instructors and recruits, and they were not anywhere near as scary as what I dealt with on the Marine Corps Depot. Now, I'm not saying anything about their actual boot camp. I don't know, but their drill instructors were like not scary comparatively. Okay, for the Air Force, we're going with a Tesla. Because you know what? They've got all the fancy bells and whistles and funding, and we all know that. They're ideal for if you want comfort or tech or education or job transferability. They really are good for all of those things. And you do need to watch out for the fact that they have slower promotions generally, and that they are competitive to get in. And when I say competitive entry, what I mean by this is they have a lot of people banging down the door to go Air Force because they hear it's the easy button, right? And that's not saying that as a negative thing. Like, a lot of people who were Marines encourage their kids to go Air Force because they're like, hey, you're not going to get treated like shit, unless you really want that path. Like, the Air Force is the easier, way to still get service and benefits. And that's not a knock. It is just what they're known for. So the perception then is that they're smarter because they generally will turn you away unless you get a 50 on the ASVAB. Fun fact, the Marine Corps is actually the only branch that has a requirement for what percentage of people they allow in with a 50 or higher on the ASVAB. So 2/3 of people that join the Marine Corps have to have over a 50 on the ASVAB, and only 1/3 is allowed to have below that. And if you drop below that as a Marine Corps recruiter, the command will actually come down and tell you, hey, you can't enlist anyone else who got below a 50 until you enlist 2 that got over a 50. So we don't care how many kids you got ready to enlist, you're missing mission until you find smart ones. The Air Force doesn't have that criteria in writing. However, because so many people want to join the Air Force, they have the perk of just kind of saying, unless you got a 50, we're not taking you. And like, we always joked as Marine Corps recruiters, kids would say, I want to talk to the Air Force too. And I'd be like, here's their address. Go knock on the door. Once you give up on trying to get a hold of the Air Force recruiter because he doesn't need you and isn't in his office, feel free to come back to us. We'll take you. And I wouldn't say they almost always came back, but a lot of times they came back because they're like, dude, the Air Force won't talk to me, or the Air Force isn't there. I can't get a hold of them, because they've made mission and they don't like have to hunt for it. And so, it is a little bit more competitive to get in, not because they have higher standards, but because they can only take so many people. And there's a lot of people lined up that want to go Air Force. It is what it is. Now, their quality of life is definitely better to an extent. Now they call them dorms instead of barracks rooms, and they've got incredible chow halls, and they've got cool bases and high tech and all the fancy things. I'd say the location of their bases isn't quite as cool as like the Navy and Marine Corps that are all like, tropical sea base and on beaches and whatever. But the Air Force has some really cool perks, and I know I'm definitely selling the Air Force here. They're great for anything in the aviation, cyber, electronics, side of the world. Like, they are known for tech and opportunities in those fields, and it's great for the education side of wanting to go and get a degree both while you're in or out. They do a good job of trying to make sure their jobs transfer and their education is a priority. They do a better job of wanting and helping you go to school. The benefits are out there for everyone, but the Air Force tries to facilitate it, whereas the Marine Corps is kind of like, if you want it, you got to go get it. The Air Force boot camp is like 7.5 weeks long. It's not that intense from my understanding. I will say, fun fact, way back in, it was probably 2010, 2012, the Air Force actually released a commercial that was saying that their boot camp was harder than the Marine Corps' boot camp. And it's like a drill instructor talking about how their recruits are in better shape than Marine recruits. And my understanding for why that got pulled off the internet very quickly or off the air is that the Commandant of the Marine Corps essentially called the Commandant of the Air Force and was like, put your money where your mouth is. If you're going to publish that, let's get a recruit. Like, we will fly a platoon of Marine recruit graduates to the Air Force boot camp, and we'll challenge you in any game you want to play. And the Air Force pulled the video down. Now, I don't know that that's exactly how that went down, but that's how I'd like to think it went down, because anyone who thinks Air Force boot camp is harder than Marine Corps boot camp just has not been to both. The Air Force is better for like overall quality of life and career after the military. They really are set up to be like a more comfortable, more education focused, more career focused branch of service, which, while I'm talking about it, obviously this sounds great. And there's a lot of people who are like, why would I ever choose another branch? Because some people value things other than comfort, easy life, education, right? Like, when I talk about the pride of being a Marine and challenging yourself and pushing yourself to your limits, there are people who, like myself included, who thrive off the challenges and the like not easy button and like pushing yourself to the max and seeing what you're made of. And there's a pride and a brotherhood that comes with that. It's the same reason people join special forces. It's definitely not easier to go special forces, but there's a reason people do it. Briefly, we're going to touch on the Space Force. This is still fairly new, so, we're kind of digging. I'm just going to call them like a Rivian truck because they're similar to the Air Force or Department of the Air Force, like the Marines or Department of the Navy. It's ideal for high performers, cyber warriors, futurists. I am looking at my notes because, again, I've not really interacted with a ton of Space Force people. They're very selective. They are a very small branch of the military and slowly growing. And while they're not Star Wars, they might be kind of close, and they deal with a lot of GPS and satellite stuff and a lot of the higher tech stuff even than the Air Force. The Space Force is still evolving, so you'll even have the chance to kind of help shape that culture as you're in the Space Force. Their boot camp is 7.5 weeks. They actually go to Air Force boot camp before they split off to go towards Space Force. So, I mean, they're even more integrated than the Navy and the Marine Corps by far. And they're good for like elite tech jobs and massive, career potential in the cyberspace and IT spaces after the military. I don't know a whole lot more than that, so we're going to kind of leave it at that. For the Coast Guard, we're going with the Alfa Romeo because you have no idea what it is, and unless you own one or have been in one, you're probably clueless, and to the point where we all kind of make fun of them for not even being a branch of the DoD, their Department of Homeland Security. That said, Coast Guard is awesome and does have most of the same benefits, and they are a pretty cool option for people who want to join. They're ideal for things like law enforcement, rescue missions, Homeland Security. They've got fewer job slots and extremely limited, if any, overseas deployments, right? So if you want to stay stateside, great. If you want to go to actual combat, probably not your branch. They do a ton of drug interdiction, humanitarian stuff. They deal with rescue missions. They have rescue swimmers. If you've ever watched the movie The Guardian with Ashton Kutcher, I'm not a huge Ashton Kutcher fan, but that's actually a really good movie. They do a pretty cool job glamorizing the rescue swimmers, but I've known a few guys who are or were rescue swimmers in the Coast Guard that were just absolute studs. So it is not easy, and they do some really cool stuff. There's only like 41,000 people in the Coast Guard. It is definitely a smaller branch. Their boot camp is 8 weeks. Fun fact, the Coast Guard is the only branch of the military that requires former Marines to go through boot camp. So if you go through Marine Corps boot camp, you serve honorably as a Marine, you get out, and you go to the Army, the Navy, Air Force, Space Force, whatever, you don't go through their boot camp. They say, you know what, you went through Marine Corps boot camp, that's good enough for us. Another case in point for them being the harder branch of service, because anyone has to go through Marine Corps boot camp. You have to be a Marine. And then the Coast Guard actually does require you to go through their boot camp. And I have a friend or two who have gone from the Marine Corps to the Coast Guard who said mentally it's actually pretty challenging. Not so much physically, but mentally, it's actually fairly challenging. Now, they do have unique missions, and they're often stateside or coastal. So like in Hawaii, they do a lot of rescue ops. In Alaska, they do like ice breaking and stuff. And I've talked to some guys who worked on icebreakers, and they absolutely loved it. And then they've got, in Florida, they deal with all the drug running and cartels and stuff from Cuba or whatever. And there's like a lot of fun stuff that those guys get to do, some fun missions. So look, this is often shit on, rarely talked about, but the Coast Guard is actually a pretty cool branch. And they do have a lot of high impact, like fun jobs and careers that you can do, and especially powerful if you want to do anything with like law enforcement or rescue. Now, I'm going to flash this thing up on the screen. I had ChatGPT rank all of the branches, giving me like a visual depiction of which branch is best for which category to help you with these whole pros and cons side of things. So here, take a look. So as you can see, if pride of service is important to you, the Marines are the best branch. If civilian jobs or living conditions or educational benefits are most important to you, the Air Force is the best branch. For travel opportunities, the Navy is the best branch. For combat exposure, the Marine Corps is the best branch. For unique missions, meaning essentially that they're different than all the other branches, the Coast Guard is the best branch. And for technology focus, the Space Force is the best branch. And funny enough, you'll see here that the Army wasn't mentioned, which kind of like this was ChatGPT that made this slide and decided who was best for everything. So you'll see when I make my joke about the Army not being the best at anything, so there is no joke about them, even ChatGPT agrees with me. That said, the Army is good at all of this. So it's like the perfect middle of the road decision. So I'm not saying that the Army sucks. This isn't an Army attack. It's saying, hey, like this is a good middle ground for everything. So if all of these are important and you're like, I don't know, none of these really outweigh the rest, there's your answer. Join the Army. All right, couple of extra thoughts here. If you're looking at Special Forces, right, you've got the Navy SEALs, you've got the Green Berets in the Army, you've got the parajumpers and CCT combat controllers in the Air Force. There's Guardian cyber units in the Space Force, which honestly I don't know a whole lot about because they're fairly new. There's the Marine Corps Special Operations Command, MARSOC, the Raiders. And then in the Coast Guard, I would say they're rescue swimmers and that side of the world. They've probably got some more drug interdiction side that's actually more Special Forces, but they have some cool stuff. Every branch has something. And they're all a little bit different. They all have a little bit different, unique role, right? For example, PJs are like jump-in medics and CCTs are like really high-speed JTACs and they call in, military fire and air attacks. Whereas like the SEALs and the Raiders are more like direct infill combat operations. And so they all have a little bit different. So just do your homework on each of those Special Forces. If you're looking to go in Special Forces, here's the thing that I always tell people though. If you try to go Special Forces in any branch of the military and you don't make it, that branch of the military has the option to choose exactly where you go. It is roulette from there. You're going to end up wherever they want. But if you go Navy or Air Force, it's a guarantee because there are no other combat positions that you're going to not be in a combat position. So we always joked like the Buds Duds, the guys who dropped out of SEALs, become like the guy who scraped barnacles off boats, forget what they call them, or corpsmen, like nurses, right? And in the Air Force, I don't really know where they end up, but they don't have another combat role, so not in combat. So if you're like gung-ho dead set on like super high-speed special operations, adventures, and combat, I'm not telling you not to go Air Force or Navy, but like, just know that if you don't make it, then you're not getting that. Whereas the Army side, if you don't make Green Beret, you can still be a Ranger. You can still be airborne. You can still be typical 11 Bravo infantry. And in the Marine Corps, you actually can't even try out for Special Forces, MARSOC, till you've been in the Marine Corps for a little while. So you can go infantry or whatever job you choose and then try out for Special Forces 2, 3, 4 years in. They change it every now and then, but it's more rank-based. And when you try out, if you make it, you're Special Forces. And if you don't, you go right back to the job you were doing. So you could pick a job that's very tech or skill set savvy. You could be an air traffic controller or whatever you want to do in the Marine Corps. And then you try out for Special Forces. If you make it, great. If you don't, you stay air traffic control. So it's, at least you know what you're getting. I always told people if they wanted to be a reconnaissance Marine, which is not technically Special Forces, but it's like our high-speed infantry, that they should, instead of signing a recon contract, they should go infantry and then volunteer to try out for recon. Because that way, if they don't make it, they stay infantry. Whereas if you try recon, you don't make it, you kind of go needs of the Marine Corps. So just some thoughts on the Special Forces side and how you make that decision, because the reality is no matter how incredible you are, how much you believe in yourself, there's a reason that there's a very high attrition rate for every one of these special operations selections. I myself tried out for the Marine Corps Special Operations Command, the Raiders, and I didn't make it. I blew out my knee, I got hurt, and then I never got to go back because I ended up on recruiting duty, and by then I was like married and had a kid, so things changed. My priorities had changed. But I only made it, I think, like 4 weeks into ASPOC, which anyone who's Raider side knows what I'm talking about, so they at least know I speak the language. But I DOR'd, meaning I dropped on request, meaning I was under the impression that if I DOR'd, I had the opportunity to heal and go back in 6 months, whereas if I got forced to quit via a medical injury, depending on what that was, I may never be allowed to come back. So I dropped out. And so, that was a decision I made, but I know a thing or two about having gone and tried out for Special Forces and come back to your actual job. And it worked out for me in the end. But I do appreciate that kind of buffer there where it's not just totally like, F it, I'm going for it, and then gonna get stuck wherever you get stuck. And I'll say this as another bonus tip, your job ultimately matters more. I don't want to say more than the branch, but I would say equally. So for example, a pararescue, parajumper, CCT, PJ guy in the Air Force is going to arguably have a lot more adventure and combat opportunity than a cook or a truck driver in the Marine Corps. Now, I was a truck driver and I did some really cool stuff while I was in, but then after the war kind of died down, we went more to glorified milk runner, and the CCT PJ guys are still doing all this cool badass training, and we're driving MREs to location. So weigh your job that you're looking at equally with the branch that fits your personality, because those two things will mesh to help you make this decision very, very well for yourself. Another great example is medical. Marines don't have medical. We use Navy medical, sometimes Army, depending on what base you're on. Army, Air Force, Navy all have medical. I don't know about the other branches. Arguably, I think the Army and the Navy have the strongest medical programs, but there are jobs that will only be open to some branches. The Marine Corps shut down their tank division and sold it to the Army 4 or 5 years ago. And so if you want to be driving Abrams, you got to go Army now. So there are differences for every branch. And I would say you need to give equal weight to what job or career you want to have in the military, because that's also going to vary across branches. And I've met incredibly successful veterans from every single branch of the military. So this is not saying you have to choose one over the other. Pick the one that helps and fits your personality. You shouldn't choose or join a branch of the military because other people tell you to. You should choose a branch of the military based on your goals, your personality, what you want out of the service, and what aligns with those. Ultimately, it's your decision. You have to live with it for the rest of your life. And if you choose the Air Force, sure, Marines, and your family are going to poke and jab at you. And secretly, they're going to be like, I should have gone Air Force. Their chow walls are better than ours. And if your whole family is the Air Force and you go Marine Corps, then they're all going to talk shit about you eating crayons and being a dum-dum. And secretly, they're all going to be jealous about the pride and the uniforms and the fact that you had the guts to do the thing. Every branch is going to shit talk you no matter what. Make the decision that fits best for you, because ultimately serving in the military, one big brotherly love family, and we all welcome you. And then another thing that you should decide is active duty versus reserve. I'm not going to go into detail on this really right now, but comment down below if you'd like me to do a video that really breaks down how to make the decision for yourself about whether you should go active duty or reserve or guard, and kind of what those two lifestyles look like. But you should definitely do some research on that, because again, active duty life and reserve life for each branch are going to be different. And so again, you just need to know what your long-term goals and expectations are to make the decision that best fits your life. Now, ultimately, I'll tell you real quick, I joined the Marine Corps. And I talked to every single branch other than the Coast Guard and the Space Force, because one, I'm way too old for the Space Force. They didn't exist for a decade or two later. And two, the Coast Guard, the nearest Coast Guard recruiter was Kansas City, and I was in Little Rock. I didn't know where to find them. But I talked to the Army, Navy, Air Force, Marine Corps. And I ultimately chose the Marine Corps for a couple of reasons. One, I was leaning towards the combat side and the wanting to actually deploy and do stuff like that. So that kind of narrowed out the Air Force and the Navy. I didn't want the easy button. College was not super important to me at the time. I wanted the challenge. I wanted the adventure. I wanted the esprit de corps, the camaraderie, the brotherhood, the pride, all the things that come with Marine Corps and Army. And the combat side, which, whatever. And then obviously the uniforms are great. And the recruiters that I met presented themselves very well on the Marine Corps side. But I remember when I was sitting down and I narrowed it down to like the Army and the Marine Corps. And for me, one of the biggest factors, which is just kind of a dumb thing, is I pulled up where all the different branches or where all the different bases were for each branch. And like, yeah, the Army had Germany and Italy and Korea and some other cool places. But by and large, they had a lot of bases like Fort Riley, Kansas, Fort Sill, Oklahoma, Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri, Kentucky, you know, all these like just middle of the country, El Paso, like just places I was like, I don't want to go there. And then the Marine Corps, yes, they have 29 bombs. Like, I'm not pretending we have all perfect bases, but we also had San Diego, Hawaii, Lejeune, which is on the East Coast, Okinawa, Japan. Like, by and large, the Marine Corps' bases are all coastal and or tropical. And that was more appealing to me, that there was either like overseas or tropical for the vast majority of places I could get stationed. That was one of the major factors for me. And then obviously the adventure and the travel and the pride and all that. But that was kind of why I chose the Marine Corps. And for the record, I don't regret it at all. I'm very, very, very proud to be a United States Marine. And I will always be. And that brotherhood is something that I will carry with me for the rest of my life. And so I'm okay with the fact that it was not the easy button, and it was more challenging, and it was less quality of life and, you know, less education focused and all that, because it fit what I wanted. So do me a favor. I'd love to hear your reasons. Comment down below what branch you chose and why, or what branch you're leaning towards after watching this and why. And I'd love to kind of get a consensus to see like what aligns as far as what branch of service and the reason, to see maybe I'll do some follow-on videos about all that data, because it'll be really cool. So just do me a favor. If you watch this and you're either considering or already in the military, comment down below which you chose and why, or what you're leaning towards and why. And then also I will drop a link down below to my book, The No BS Guide to Military Life, which is everything that I wish I'd known when I joined the military from both a career and like financial freedom, like investing side. You can download the PDF for 100% free. I'll drop the link down below for you to do that. And I hope you guys got something out of this video. Let me know if this helped you make that decision, because it is ultimately a very important decision. And if you're still on the fence, this is what I would do. I would take a piece of paper, I'd write a line right down the middle, I'd write pros on one side, cons on the other side, and I would write down the pros and cons of every branch, or at least the ones you're stuck between. Or I'd write down the pros and cons of what you want out of the military, and then see which one, like just put it out on paper and just visualize it. It will help you make that decision. And then trust your gut. Your gut knows the answer already. As weird as that sounds. Write it all out, do all the data, whatever, stare at it, think on it for a day or two, come back to it, trust your gut. Whatever your body's leaning towards, that's the way to go. So hope this helped. Love you guys. Subscribe, comment, all that good shit. Smash the like button. Have a great day.